When Vivian Hale burst through the restaurant doors 40 minutes late, covered in snow and coffee stains, wearing a wrinkled blazer that cost more than most people's monthly rent, she expected anger, maybe disgust, definitely abandonment. What she didn't expect was Cole Bennett, a mechanic she'd never met, still sitting by the fireplace with a patience that made her chest tighten. While the entire room stared at the disheveled billionaire CEO, who looked like she'd crawled through a corporate battlefield, he just looked at her like she mattered. Not her money, not her empire, just her. And when he asked, "Are you okay?" instead of, "Where the hell have you been?" something inside Vivian cracked open that she'd spent 30 years keeping shut. If you want to see how a woman who built billion-dollar empires finally learned she doesn't have to destroy everything she loves, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The emergency board meeting had gone to hell around 4:30. Vivian Hale stood at the head of the conference table in her Denver headquarters, watching 3 senior investors threaten to pull funding from the Meridian merger unless she personally guaranteed returns they all knew were mathematically impossible. Her vice president sat frozen 2 seats down. Her CFO kept clearing his throat like he wanted to intervene, but couldn't figure out how. She'd worn her intimidation suit that morning, the charcoal Armani with the razor-sharp shoulders that made her look taller than 5'6". She'd pulled her dark hair into the kind of bun that said, "Don't waste my time." She'd walked into that room ready to close the deal that would expand Hale Industries into 3 new markets and cement her reputation as one of the most aggressive CEOs under 35. Instead, she'd spent 2 hours getting cornered by men twice her age who smiled while they gutted her. By the time she made it to her car, snow was already falling. Fat, heavy flakes that turned Denver's streets into a blurred mess of brake lights and honking horns. Her phone buzzed against the passenger seat. Texts from her assistant, her lawyer, her publicist. She ignored all of them. Then she remembered. The blind date. Vivian actually laughed out loud in the car. A sharp, bitter sound that echoed off the windshield. Her best friend Rachel had set it up 3 weeks ago during one of those late-night conversations where you admit things you'd never say sober. You're lonely, Viv. You work 80-hour weeks and you come home to an empty penthouse. Just meet him. One dinner. If it's awful, you never have to see him again. She'd agreed because Rachel was relentless, and because part of Vivian, some small, stupid part she tried to ignore, wanted to believe someone might actually want to sit across from her without an agenda. The restaurant was an hour outside Denver, tucked into the mountains near Aspen, upscale enough that Rachel thought it would impress her mystery mechanic. Vivian checked the time. She was supposed to be there at 7. It was 7:40. She should have canceled, sent a polite text, made up an excuse about work. But something stubborn in her, the same part that refused to back down during negotiations, made her keep driving. If he'd already left, fine. She'd have a drink alone and call it a night. If he was still there, she'd apologize and leave anyway. Either way, she told herself, it didn't matter. The snow got worse the higher she climbed into the mountains. Her headlights barely cut through the white curtain falling across the road. Twice, she felt her tires slip on ice she couldn't see. Her hands ached from gripping the steering wheel. When she finally pulled into the restaurant parking lot at 8:17, she sat in the car for a full minute, staring at the warm glow spilling from the windows. Her reflection in the rearview mirror looked like something out of a disaster film. Her bun had half collapsed, mascara smudged under her right eye. The coffee she'd spilled during the meeting had left a dark stain across her blouse, visible even under her blazer. She looked like she'd been through a war, which she figured wasn't that far from the truth. Vivian grabbed her purse and stepped out into the storm. Snow immediately soaked through her heels, expensive, impractical things she wore because they made her feel powerful in boardrooms. They were useless here. She half walked, half stumbled toward the entrance, cold air biting through her coat. The hostess looked up when Vivian pushed through the door, and her professional smile faltered just slightly. Vivian knew what she saw. A woman who clearly didn't belong. Someone who looked like she'd gotten lost on the way to somewhere better. "Reservation for Hale," Vivian said, brushing snow out of her hair. The hostess checked her screen. "Oh, yes. Your party is already seated." Vivian blinked. "He's still here?" "A C-E-E-E-C, by the fireplace." The hostess gestured toward the back of the restaurant, where soft lighting pooled around tables filled with couples leaning close over wine glasses. Vivian's stomach twisted. She should have known Rachel wouldn't set her up with someone normal. This guy was probably some trust fund socialite who thought showing up late was a power move. Or worse, someone who recognized her name and saw dollar signs. She followed the hostess through the dining room, very aware of the way conversations paused as she passed. A few people glanced up from their plates, taking in her disheveled appearance with barely concealed curiosity. And then she saw him. Cole Bennett sat in a corner booth near the stone fireplace, his back to the wall. He wasn't checking his phone, wasn't flagging down the waiter with impatient gestures. He was just sitting there, hands folded on the table, watching the fire like he had all the time in the world. He looked nothing like what Vivian expected. No designer suit, no flashy watch, just a simple button-down shirt, dark blue, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and jeans that looked like he actually worked in them. His hair was a little too long, dark, and slightly messy, like he'd run his hands through it a few times and forgotten to fix it. He had the kind of face that didn't photograph well but looked better in person, strong jaw, tired eyes, the beginning of stubble along his chin. He looked up when the hostess approached and his gaze landed on Vivian. She braced herself for the judgment, the irritation, the once-over that men always did when they saw her, calculating her net worth before they calculated anything else. Instead, Cole stood up slowly, and the first thing he said was, "Are you okay?" Vivian stopped walking. The hostess hovered uncertainly. Someone at the next table laughed too loud. The fire crackled in the hearth. "What?" Vivian managed. Cole gestured to the chair across from him. "You look like you've had a rough night. Do you want to sit down?" No apology demand. No sarcastic comment about her being late, just concern. Actual, genuine concern. Vivian didn't know what to do with that. She slid into the booth because standing there any longer felt ridiculous. The hostess disappeared. Cole sat back down, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "I'm sorry I'm late," Vivian said finally. Her voice came out sharper than she intended. "I had a work emergency. Rachel mentioned you run a company." "I own a company." The correction was automatic. "Hale Industries. We do infrastructure development and—" She stopped herself. "You don't care about that." "I didn't say that." Vivian looked at him properly for the first time. His eyes were hazel, she realized, brown with flecks of green that caught the firelight. He wasn't smiling, exactly, but there was something calm about his expression. Something that made her feel like she didn't need to perform. It was unsettling. "Rachel also mentioned you're a mechanic," Vivian said, trying to regain some control over the conversation. "I own a garage. Bennett Auto Repair. It's about 20 minutes from here." "That's nice." Cole's mouth twitched. "You don't have to do that." "Do what?" "Pretend you care about my job when you're clearly still thinking about whatever happened at work." Vivian's spine straightened. "I'm not—" "Your hands are shaking." She glanced down. He was right. Her fingers trembled slightly against the table. She pulled them into her lap. "Bad meeting," she admitted. "Want to talk about it?" "Not particularly." "Fair enough." The waiter appeared then, hovering nervously at the edge of their table. Vivian hadn't even looked at the menu. Cole ordered a beer. She asked for red wine, the most expensive one they had, because habits died hard. When the waiter left, Cole leaned back in his seat and studied her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What?" Vivian asked. "You're not what I expected. What did Rachel tell you about me?" "That you're smart, that you work too much, that you haven't been on a date in over a year." Vivian's face heated. "She said that?" "She also said you'd probably try to leave within the first 10 minutes. I'm still here." "You are. Why are you still here?" The question came out before Vivian could stop it. "I was 40 minutes late. Most people would have left." "Mate eats." Cole shrugged. "I figured you had a reason, and if you didn't show up at all, I'd just have a quiet dinner by myself. Either way, it's fine." Vivian didn't know what to say to that. In her world, time was currency. Being late was a sign of disrespect. People kept score. They remembered. "Besides," Cole added, "I've got nowhere else to be." "No hot Friday night plans? My daughter's at a sleepover. House is empty. Thought I'd take a chance on something Rachel promised wouldn't be completely terrible." Vivian absorbed that information slowly. Daughter. Of course he had a daughter. Rachel had mentioned it in passing, but Vivian had been distracted, half listening while reviewing contracts. How old is she? Vivian asked. 6. Her name's Sadie. Something in his voice softened when he said the name, not in a performative way, just genuine affection. Their drinks arrived. Vivian took a long sip of wine and felt some of the tension bleed out of her shoulders. So, Cole said, since we're both stuck here for the next hour, you want to tell me why you really showed up? Vivian almost lied, almost gave him the polite, rehearsed answer she used at networking events. But something about the way he looked at her, patient, curious, without expectation, made her tell the truth instead. I don't know, she said quietly. I think I just didn't want to go home yet. Cole nodded like that made perfect sense. Yeah, he said, I get that. And somehow, Vivian believed him. They talked for 2 hours. Not about work, not about money or mergers, or the board meeting that had gutted her earlier. Cole asked her simple questions. What she did for fun, what she missed about being a kid, whether she liked living in Denver. Vivian couldn't remember the last time someone had asked her anything that didn't have a business motive behind it. She learned that Cole had grown up in a small town in Wyoming, that he'd joined the Navy right out of high school and spent 6 years working on aircraft carriers before coming back stateside, that he'd bought the garage 5 years ago with money he'd saved and a loan he was still paying off. And Sadie's mom? Vivian asked, then immediately regretted it. Sorry, that's too personal. It's fine. Cole took a sip of his second beer. She left when Sadie was 8 months old. Haven't heard from her since. I'm sorry. Don't be. Sadie and I are good. Better off, honestly. Vivian believed that too. She told him about growing up in Boston, about her father, who'd built his own company from nothing and expected her to do the same, about business school at 22 and her first acquisition at 25. About the penthouse she barely lived in because she spent more time at the office than anywhere else. You like what you do? Cole asked. Vivian paused. No one ever asked her that. They asked if she was successful, if she was winning, if she was beating the competition. I'm good at it, she said finally. That's not what I asked. She looked at him across the table. The firelight made his face look softer, younger, maybe, or just less guarded. I don't know, Vivian admitted. I used to. Now it just feels like the only thing I know how to do. Cole didn't offer advice, didn't try to fix it. He just nodded like he understood. By the time they finished dinner, the snow had stopped. The restaurant was nearly empty. The waiter brought the check, and Vivian reached for it automatically. I've got it, Cole said. I was the one who showed up late. And I'm the one who asked you to stay. Their hands touched briefly over the leather billfold. Vivian pulled back first. Split it? She offered. Cole smiled. A real one this time, slow and a little crooked. Sure. They walked out into the cold together. The parking lot was covered in fresh snow, smooth and untouched, except for their footprints. Vivian's car was buried under a white drift. You going to make it back to Denver in that? Cole asked, nodding toward her sedan. I've driven in worse. That's not reassuring. Vivian turned to face him. Her breath misted in the air between them. Thanks for waiting. Thanks for showing up. Lowell, They stood there for a moment and Vivian realized she didn't want to leave, which was ridiculous. She barely knew this man. He was a mechanic from a small town with a 6-year-old daughter and a life that had nothing to do with hers. But he'd looked at her like she was a person, not a portfolio. And that was something Vivian hadn't felt in a very long time. Rachel's going to ask how this went, Cole said. What are you going to tell her? That you're not terrible. Vivian laughed. A real laugh, surprised and rough. High praise. What are you going to tell her? Vivian considered. That I didn't leave in the first 10 minutes. Even higher praise. He smiled again and Vivian felt something warm settle in her chest. Something dangerous. Can I see you again? Cole asked. She should have said no. Should have told him this was nice, but she didn't have time for dating or relationships or anything that required her to be vulnerable. Instead, she heard herself say, yeah, I'd like that. Cole pulled out his phone and they exchanged numbers. His contact photo was a picture of a little girl with dark curls and a gap-toothed grin, holding up a drawing of what looked like a rocket ship. That's Sadie, Cole said when he caught her looking. She's beautiful. She's a handful. Vivian handed him back his phone. Good luck with the sleepover pickup tomorrow. Good luck with whatever's waiting for you at the office. They said goodnight. Vivian climbed into her car and watched Cole walk toward a truck parked on the other side of the lot. An older Ford, well-maintained but clearly used for work. He brushed snow off the windshield with his bare hands, then waved once before getting in. Vivian sat there until his taillights disappeared down the mountain road. Then she started her car and drove back toward Denver, and for the first time in months, the empty penthouse waiting for her didn't feel quite so suffocating. The text came 3 days later. Vivian was in the middle of a conference call with her legal team when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Cole, Sadie wants to know if you like hot chocolate. Vivian stared at the message. Her lawyer was still talking, something about contract clauses and liability, but the words blurred into background noise. She typed back quickly. Vivian, is this a test? Cole, she takes hot chocolate very seriously. Vivian, then yes, I like hot chocolate. Cole, good. She's making some this weekend. You're invited. Vivian's heart did something complicated in her chest. Vivian, to your house? Cole, unless you'd prefer a 5-star restaurant, but fair warning, Sadie's not great with fancy table manners. Vivian, your house is fine. Cole, Saturday at 2? Vivian, I'll be there. She set her phone down and realized her lawyer had stopped talking. Ms. Hale, he said carefully. Did you catch that last part? Say. Vivian forced herself to focus. Run it by me again. He did. She made notes. She asked the right questions. But part of her brain was already somewhere else, thinking about a little girl who took hot chocolate seriously and a man who didn't care that Vivian ran a billion-dollar company. When the call ended, Vivian pulled up Cole's contact and stared at Sadie's gap-toothed smile for a long time. Then she saved the number under a different name. Not Cole Bennett, mechanic, just Cole. And that felt like the start of something she couldn't take back. Saturday came faster than Vivian expected. She stood outside Cole's house at 1:58, holding a bag of groceries she'd panic bought at an organic market in Denver because she didn't know. What you brought to a mechanic's house when his 6-year-old daughter invited you for hot chocolate. The house was small. A single-story ranch with faded blue siding and a front porch that looked like it had been repaired more than once. The yard was buried under snow, but Vivian could see the outline of a swing set in the back and a basketball hoop mounted over the garage. It looked lived in, loved, nothing like the sterile penthouse she called home. She knocked. Footsteps thundered inside. The door flew open and Vivian found herself staring down at a little girl with dark curls pulled into lopsided pigtails and eyes that matched Cole's exactly. Are you Vivian? Sadie demanded. I am. Dad said you're really busy and really important. Vivian blinked. Did he? Uh-huh. He also said you're nice. Are you nice? I try to be. Sadie considered this seriously. Then she stepped back and yelled over her shoulder, Dad, she's here and she brought stuff. Cole appeared in the hallway, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He wore jeans and a flannel shirt, barefoot despite the cold. His hair was even messier than Vivian remembered. He looked good. Hey, he said, smiling. You found us. GPS helped. Come in. It's freezing out there. Bo si bo ba. Vivian stepped inside and warmth immediately wrapped around her. The house smelled like cinnamon and something baking. A fire crackled in a small fireplace in the living room. Toys were scattered across the floor. Action figures, coloring books, a half-built Lego castle. It was chaotic and messy and nothing like anywhere Vivian had ever spent time. She loved it immediately. I wasn't sure what to bring, Vivian said, holding up the grocery bag. So I got things. Cole took the bag and peered inside. His eyebrows rose. Is this organic almond milk? Is that wrong? Sadie's lactose intolerant. It's perfect. He looked at her with something close to surprise. How'd you know? I didn't, I just guessed. But the way Cole smiled made her feel like she'd done something right anyway. Sadie grabbed Vivian's hand and tugged her toward the kitchen. Come on, I'm making the hot chocolate. Dad says I'm really good at it. But she is, Cole confirmed, following behind them. Fair warning, though, she uses a lot of marshmallows. There's no such thing as too many marshmallows, Sadie said solemnly. Vivian bit back a smile. I agree completely. The kitchen was small and cluttered in the best way. Mugs sat drying by the sink, drawings covered the fridge, held up by mismatched magnets. A chalkboard on the wall listed grocery items in Cole's handwriting and doodles in what had to be Sadie's. Sadie climbed onto a stool and pointed at the stove. Dad, turn it on, medium heat. Yes, ma'am. Cole set a pot on the burner while Sadie carefully measured out cocoa powder with the intensity of a scientist. Vivian stood awkwardly by the counter, unsure where she fit in this routine. You can sit, Cole said, nodding toward the small kitchen table. I don't mind helping. Can you stir? Sadie asked. I think so. Okay, but you have to stir slow. If you go too fast, it gets lumpy. Vivian took the wooden spoon Sadie handed her and stirred the pot slowly while Sadie added milk and sugar. Cole leaned against the counter, watching them with an expression Vivian couldn't quite name. So, Sadie said very seriously, do you have any kids? Sadie, Cole warned. What? I'm just asking. No, Vivian said, I don't. Do you want kids? Vivian hesitated. No one had ever asked her that so directly. I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. That's okay. Dad says some people don't want kids, and that's fine too. That's true, Vivian agreed. But if you did have kids, would you let them have hot chocolate whenever they wanted? Cole snorted. Subtle, Sadie. I'm just gathering information, Sadie said primly. Vivian smiled despite herself. I think hot chocolate should be earned. Maybe as a reward for cleaning your room. Sadie wrinkled her nose. That's a terrible rule. Told you she was smart, Cole said. They finished making the hot chocolate together. Sadie piled marshmallows into 3 mugs, so many that they nearly overflowed, and declared the recipe a success. They carried everything into the living room and sat by the fire. Sadie talked nonstop. About school. About her best friend Emma. About the solar system project she was working on for science class. She asked Vivian a million questions. Where she lived, what kind of car she drove, whether she'd ever been to space. Not yet, Vivian said. Dad says maybe one day regular people can go to space. Do you think that's true? I think if anyone figures out how to do it, they'll be very rich. Are you very rich? Sadie, Cole said, more firmly this time. It's okay, Vivian said quickly. She looked at Sadie. I have enough money, yeah. Cool, can you buy me a telescope? Sadie! But Vivian laughed, really laughed, the kind that made her ribs hurt. Maybe for your birthday. But Sadie's face lit up like Vivian had just promised her the moon. Cole shook his head, but he was smiling too. They stayed by the fire for hours. At some point, Sadie curled up between them on the couch, her head resting on Vivian's shoulder while Cole read aloud from a book about constellations. His voice was low and steady, and Vivian found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in years. When Sadie finally fell asleep, Cole carefully carried her to her bedroom. Vivian stayed on the couch, staring into the fire and trying to figure out what she was doing here. Cole came back a few minutes later and sat down beside her. Sorry, he said quietly. She gets excited about new people. She's wonderful. She likes you. How can you tell? She asked if you'd come back next week. Vivian's chest tightened. What did you say? That I'd ask you. They sat in silence for a moment. The fire popped softly. This is dangerous, Vivian said finally. What is? This. She gestured vaguely at the house. At him. I don't do this. I don't sit in living rooms drinking hot chocolate with 6-year-olds. I run a company. I close deals. I don't have time for... For what? Cole asked gently. Vivian couldn't finish the sentence. Cole reached over and took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused, rough from years of working with tools. You don't have to figure it all out tonight, he said. I'm not good at this. At what? At being a person, outside of work. Cole squeezed her hand. You're doing fine. Vivian looked at him, really looked, at the tired lines around his eyes, at the stubble on his jaw, at the way he looked at her like she wasn't a CEO or a billionaire or someone untouchable, just Vivian. I want to come back, but she admitted. Then come back. It's not that simple. Why not? Because she was terrified. Because she didn't know how to let people in without destroying them. Because every relationship she'd ever had ended the same way, with her choosing work over everything else. But she didn't say any of that. Instead, she leaned over and kissed him. It was brief, tentative. Cole's hand came up to cup her jaw, his thumb brushing against her cheek. When she pulled back, he was smiling. Yeah, he said softly. You should definitely come back. Vivian left an hour later. She drove back to Denver with the taste of hot chocolate still on her lips, and the feeling of Sadie's head on her shoulder burned into her memory. And when she walked into her empty penthouse, she didn't feel lonely. She felt like she'd left something important behind, something she wanted to go back for. Vivian went back the following Saturday, and the one after that, and the one after that. It became a routine she didn't plan but couldn't seem to break. Every weekend, she'd drive up from Denver with groceries or art supplies or whatever random things Sadie had mentioned wanting during their phone calls. Cole never asked her to bring anything. Sadie never expected it, but Vivian found herself thinking about them during board meetings and conference calls, wondering what they were doing, whether Sadie had finished her solar system project, whether Cole had fixed that truck that kept stalling out. The fourth weekend, she showed up and found Cole under the hood of an old Chevy in his driveway, grease streaked across his forearms. Thought you didn't work on Saturday, Vivian said, stepping out of her car. Cole glanced up, wiping his hands on a rag. Customer emergency. Timing belt snapped on the highway. She's got 3 kids and no other car. So you're fixing it for free. Didn't say that. You didn't have to. Cole grinned, that slow, crooked smile that made Vivian's stomach flip. Sadie's inside. She's been watching the window for the last hour. I'm not late. Didn't say you were. She just likes knowing you're coming. Vivian felt something warm and uncomfortable settle in her chest. She wasn't used to being anticipated. In her world, people wanted meetings with her, access to her, favors from her. Nobody just wanted her to show up. She found Sadie in the living room, surrounded by poster board and markers, her tongue sticking out in concentration as she glued cotton balls onto what appeared to be Jupiter. That looks amazing, Vivian said. Sadie looked up, her face breaking into a huge smile. You're here! Look, I finished Saturn and I started Jupiter, but I ran out of red paint, so Dad said we could go to the store later, but I wanted to wait for you because you're better at picking colors. Vivian had no idea when she'd become the authority on paint colors, but she sat down on the floor anyway. What colors are we thinking? Orange and white, but not boring orange, like space orange. Space orange. Got it. They spent the next hour working on the solar system project together. Sadie narrated every fact she'd learned about each planet, how many moons they had, how far from the sun, whether humans could ever live there. Vivian listened and asked questions and tried not to think about the fact that she was sitting on a floor covered in glitter glue when she could have been reviewing quarterly reports. Cole came in eventually, cleaner but still smelling faintly of motor oil. He leaned against the door frame, watching them. You're going to spoil her, he said. Too late, Sadie announced. She already said she'd help me with my book report next month. Cole raised an eyebrow at Vivian. Did she now? It's on biographies, Vivian said defensively. I can help with that. Who are you writing about, Sadie? Sally Ride, the astronaut. Good choice, Sadie beamed. They ordered pizza that night because Cole's kitchen was a disaster from an earlier baking experiment that Sadie refused to discuss. They ate on the couch, watching some animated movie about talking cars that Sadie had seen a dozen times, but still laughed at like it was brand new. Vivian sat between them, Sadie curled against her left side, Cole's arm draped across the back of the couch behind her shoulders. It felt easy, normal, like she'd been doing this for years instead of weeks, and that terrified her. After Sadie went to bed, Vivian helped Cole clean up the living room. She folded the blanket Sadie had abandoned on the floor. Cole gathered up pizza boxes and empty cups. You don't have to do that, he said. I don't mind. Vivian. She looked up. Cole was standing in the middle of the room, holding a stack of plates, watching her with that expression he got sometimes, like he could see straight through all the armor she wore. What? She asked. You keep acting like you're going to mess this up. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. He set the plates down on the coffee table. Every time Sadie gets attached to you, I can see you calculating how bad it's going to hurt when you leave. Vivian's throat tightened. I'm not leaving. Aren't you? No, I'm here. Aren't I? You are. But you're also halfway out the door every time I look at you. Course. Ish asipem. Vivian wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him he was wrong. But the truth was, he wasn't. She'd spent the last month waiting for the other shoe to drop. Waiting for the moment when this, whatever this was, became too complicated or too messy or too real. When her work demanded more than she could give, and she'd have to choose between a board meeting and a 6-year-old science project. She always chose work. She always had. I'm trying, Vivian said quietly. I know. Cole crossed the room and stood in front of her. But you can't keep one foot out the door and expect this to work. I don't know how to do this, Cole. I don't know how to be someone's... She gestured vaguely. I don't even know what we're doing. We're figuring it out. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. Cole reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. His palms were rough and warm, and Vivian focused on that instead of the panic building in her chest. I like you, Cole said simply. Sadie likes you. You keep showing up. That's enough for now. What if it's not enough later? Then we'll deal with it later. Vivian looked up at him. You make it sound easy. It's not. But it doesn't have to be as complicated as you're making it. She wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that she could just let herself fall into this without planning every exit strategy. But 20 years of building walls didn't disappear because a mechanic with kind eyes told her to relax. Still, she kissed him. Slow and deliberate, tasting the last traces of the beer he'd had with dinner. Cole's hand settled on her hips, pulling her closer, and for a moment Vivian let herself stop thinking. When they broke apart, Cole rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he said. I have work tomorrow. So leave early. Just stay tonight. Vivian's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd never stayed over, never crossed that line. Leaving meant keeping control. Staying meant admitting this was real. Okay, she whispered. Cole smiled, soft and surprised, like he hadn't actually expected her to say yes. He lent her a t-shirt that smelled like laundry detergent and him. They lay in his bed, a queen-sized mattress with sheets that were clean but worn soft from use. The room was small and cluttered in the same way the rest of the house was. A dresser covered in loose change and receipts. A photo of Sadie on the nightstand. Work boots kicked into the corner. It was nothing like Vivian's penthouse with its floor-to-ceiling windows and expensive furniture that never got used. Cole pulled her against his chest, his chin resting on top of her head. Vivian listened to his heartbeat and tried to remember the last time she'd felt this settled. You still freaking out? Cole asked into the darkness. Yes. Want to talk about it? Not really. Okay. Vivian closed her eyes. Cole's hand traced slow circles on her back, and eventually, the panic faded into something quieter, something that felt almost like peace. She fell asleep in his arms and didn't dream about board meetings or hostile investors or mergers falling apart. She dreamed about hot chocolate and gap-toothed smiles and a man who looked at her like she wasn't made of glass. Vivian woke up to the sound of small feet thundering down the hallway. She sat up, disoriented, and it took her a moment to remember where she was. Cole's bed. Cole's house. Morning light filtered through thin curtains, and she could hear Sadie's voice somewhere close by, talking a mile a minute about something. The bedroom door burst open. Sadie stood in the doorway wearing pajamas covered in planets, her hair a tangled mess, holding a stuffed bear under one arm. Dad, can we make pancakes? She stopped, stared at Vivian. Her eyes went wide. You stayed over? Vivian's brain short-circuited. She had no idea what the protocol was here. What did you say to a 6-year-old who just found you in her father's bed? Cole appeared behind Sadie, looking rumpled and half asleep in sweatpants and no shirt. Sadie, knock first, remember? I forgot. Sadie was still staring at Vivian. Are you staying for breakfast? Yes? Vivian looked at Cole for help. He grinned. Pancakes sound good. Go pick out what kind. Sadie hesitated, like she had more questions, but the promise of pancakes won out. She bolted back down the hallway, bear bouncing against her side. Vivian exhaled. Well, that happened. She's going to ask a million questions. Great. Cole sat down on the edge of the bed, still smiling. For what it's worth, she's been hoping you'd stay over. She has. But she asked me last week if you were my girlfriend. I told her I didn't know yet. Vivian's stomach flipped. And now? Now, I'm pretty sure you are. It should have felt like pressure, like a trap closing around her. Instead, it just felt right. Yeah, Vivian said quietly. I guess I am, Vivian asked. Cole leaned over and kissed her, soft and unhurried. Good. Now get dressed before Sadie comes back and demands to know why we're taking so long. Breakfast was chaos. Sadie asked approximately 70 questions between bites of pancakes. Why Vivian didn't have pajamas with her, whether she was going to stay over every weekend now, if this meant they could all go to the science museum together because Emma's dad took Emma and her stepmom all the time. Vivian answered as best she could, catching Cole's amused glances across the table. Afterward, while Cole cleaned up, Sadie dragged Vivian outside to build a snowman. The yard was covered in fresh powder from the storm 2 nights before, and Sadie had big plans involving sticks and rocks and a carrot she'd stolen from the fridge. Dad said you live in a really tall building, Sadie said, packing snow into a lopsided ball. I do. Is it scary being up so high? Sometimes. Do you have a backyard? No, just a balcony. No. Sadie wrinkled her nose. That's sad. Where do you build snowmen? I don't usually. That's even sadder. Sadie patted more snow onto the growing base. You can build them here whenever you want. Dad won't care. Vivian's chest ached. Thanks, Sadie. They worked in comfortable silence for a while. Vivian's hands were freezing. She'd forgotten gloves, but she didn't care. Sadie hummed while she worked, some song Vivian didn't recognize, completely absorbed in making the snowman perfect. Can I ask you something? Sadie said eventually. Sure. Do you love my dad? Vivian nearly dropped the stick she was holding. What? Emma's stepmom says you know you love someone when you want to see them all the time, and you smile when you think about them. Do you do that with my dad? Vivian knelt down in the snow so she was eye level with Sadie. The little girl looked at her with such open curiosity, no judgment, no ulterior motive. Just a kid trying to figure out her world. I care about your dad a lot, Vivian said carefully. And I care about you a lot too. But do you love him? Vivian hesitated. The truth was, she didn't know. She'd never let herself think about it too hard because thinking about it meant acknowledging how deep she was already in. How much it would hurt if this fell apart. I think I might, Vivian admitted. Sadie grinned. Good, because he smiles at his phone a lot when you text him. It's kind of gross. Vivian laughed, surprised and genuine. Yeah? Uh-huh. Last week, he was smiling at it during dinner. And I asked what was so funny, and he said you sent him a picture of a broken coffee machine. That's not even funny. But he thought it was. Vivian remembered that. She'd been in her office at midnight, frustrated because the expensive espresso machine had malfunctioned again, and she'd sent Cole a photo with the caption, "Your world makes more sense than mine." He'd responded with a laughing emoji and want me to take a look at it. She hadn't realized he'd smiled. Cole came outside then, carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. You two almost done out here? Sadie's going to freeze. I'm fine, Sadie protested, but she ran over and grabbed one of the mugs anyway. Cole handed the other one to Vivian. Their fingers brushed, and he gave her a look that made her stomach flutter. Nice snowman, he said. Vivian did most of it, Sadie said loyally. Did not. Did too. You're better at packing snow. Us. They stood there together, the 3 of them, looking at the lopsided snowman with its crooked stick arms and rock smile. It wasn't perfect. The head was too big, and the body leaned slightly to the left. But Vivian thought it might be the best thing she'd ever made. The weeks blurred together after that. Vivian found herself splitting time between Denver and Cole's house in ways that didn't make logical sense. She'd leave the office at 7, drive an hour through mountain roads, and arrive just in time to help Sadie with homework or read bedtime stories. Her assistant started scheduling meetings around her weekend trips without being asked. Her CFO stopped looking surprised when she'd take calls from Cole's kitchen, Sadie's chatter audible in the background. Rachel called one night, voice dripping with smugness. "So, you want to thank me yet?" "For what?" Vivian was sitting on Cole's couch, laptop balanced on her knees, reviewing contracts while Cole assembled Sadie's new bookshelf on the floor. "For setting you up with the first decent man you've dated in a decade. It's been 5 years, not a decade. Vivian, the last guy you dated was that venture capitalist who kept calling you babe during pitch meetings." Vivian winced. Point taken. "So, how's it going? Really? What?" Vivian glanced at Cole. He was frowning at the instruction manual, holding 2 pieces of wood that clearly didn't fit together the way he thought they should. His hair stuck up in the back. He had reading glasses perched on his nose that he claimed he didn't need, but wore anyway. "It's good," Vivian said quietly. "Really good." "But..." "No but." "Vivian, I'm serious. It's just good." Rachel was quiet for a moment. "You sound happy. That's new." "Is it?" "Yeah, it really is." After they hung up, Vivian set her laptop aside and slid onto the floor next to Cole. "Need help?" she asked. This instruction manual was clearly written by someone who hates humanity. Cole handed her a screwdriver. "Hold this steady." They worked together, figuring out which pieces went where, arguing good-naturedly about whether Step 5 came before or after Step 4. When they finally got it assembled, mostly level, only one screw left over, Cole sat back and grinned. "Not bad." "It's leaning. It's got character." Vivian laughed. Cole pulled her against his side, and they sat there on the floor, admiring their mediocre carpentry. "Sadie's going to love it," Vivian said. "She better. This thing almost killed me twice." Dramatic. Says the woman who once called me in a panic because her office chair wouldn't stop squeaking. That was a legitimate ergonomic concern. Cole kissed the top of her head, still smiling. "Sure it was, Mom." But the cracks started showing in small ways Vivian tried to ignore. A Tuesday conference call that ran 4 hours long, making her miss Sadie's school play. Cole said it was fine. Sadie said she understood. But Vivian saw the disappointment in both their faces, and it sat heavy in her stomach for days. A weekend merger negotiation in Chicago that meant canceling plans she'd made weeks in advance. She'd promised to take Sadie to the Science Museum. Instead, she spent 2 days in a hotel conference room arguing over contractual language with lawyers who billed $1,000 an hour. Cole didn't complain. He never did. But the silences on the phone got a little longer, the texts a little shorter. "You okay?" he asked one night when Vivian finally made it back to his place after a 16-hour workday. "Exhausted. You're working too much. That's the job." "Is it?" Vivian looked up from her phone where she'd been scanning emails. "What's that supposed to mean?" Cole was leaning against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. He didn't look angry, just tired. "Nothing," he said. "Forget it." "No, say it." It's just, you've been here physically, but you're not really here. Your brain's still in Denver, still in whatever meeting you just left." "I'm doing my best, Cole." "I know you are. That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know. I guess I just wonder sometimes if there's room for us in your life. Really room. Not just the leftover hours when work's done." Vivian's defenses went up immediately. "That's not fair. I'm here, aren't I? I drive an hour every weekend. I help with homework. I show up." "You do. And I love that. Sadie loves that. But it feels like you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like you're expecting this to fail so you're not actually letting yourself be here. That's not true, isn't it?" Vivian wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, but the words stuck in her throat because part of her knew he was right. She was terrified. Terrified that this fragile, beautiful thing they were building would shatter the moment she let herself believe it could last. So she kept her guard up, kept one foot out the door, just in case. "I don't know how to do this," Vivian said, her voice cracking. "I don't know how to be the person you need me to be and still be the person my company needs me to be." Cole crossed the room and took her hands. "I'm not asking you to choose. I'm just asking you to stop acting like you have to. But I do. Eventually I will." "Why?" "Because that's how it always goes. Something at work will blow up and I'll have to pick. And I'll pick work because that's what I do. That's who I am. I saw social. That's who you've been? Cole said quietly. Doesn't mean it's who you have to be. Vivian pulled her hands away. You don't understand. You have a garage. You have regular hours. You get to leave work and come home and be present. I don't have that luxury. Luxury, Cole repeated. That's what you think this is? I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did. He stepped back, creating distance between them. You think because I don't run a billion-dollar company, my life is simpler, easier. But I'm a single dad, Vivian. I work 60-hour weeks to keep my business afloat. I've got a kid who needs me. It's not simple. I just made a choice about what matters. So now I'm a bad person because I care about my job? That's not what I said. It's what you meant. Cole shook his head. I think you should go. Vivian froze. What? I think you should go home. Think about what you actually want. Because I can't keep doing this dance where you're halfway in and halfway out. Cole, I love you, Vivian. The words hit her like a freight train. She stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. I love you, Cole repeated. And I think you love me too. But you're so scared of that meaning something that you're sabotaging this before it even has a chance. Vivian's vision blurred. She wanted to say it back. Wanted to tell him he was right. She did love him. She loved him so much it terrified her. But the words wouldn't come. Cole waited. 5 seconds. 10. When she still didn't speak, he nodded slowly. Yeah, he said quietly. That's what I thought. Vivian grabbed her coat and walked out into the cold. She made it to her car before the tears started. She sat in the driveway, hands shaking on the steering wheel, watching the light from Cole's living room window. She could go back inside, could tell him the truth, could let herself be vulnerable for once in her life. Instead, she started the car and drove away. The highway blurred in front of her. She made it halfway to Denver before she had to pull over because she couldn't see through the tears anymore. She sat on the side of the road, sobbing in a way she hadn't since she was a kid, and all she could think about was Sadie's face when she'd asked, "Do you love my dad?" Yes. The answer was yes. But loving someone meant they could hurt you, meant they could leave, meant you could destroy them without meaning to. Vivian had spent her whole life avoiding that, building walls, keeping people at arm's length. It had worked for 30 years. So why did it feel like she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life? She didn't go back that weekend, or the one after. Cole texted once. Are we talking about this, or are we done? Vivian stared at the message for an hour before typing back. I need some time. He didn't respond. Work swallowed her whole. She threw herself into the overseas expansion she'd been considering, spending 18-hour days in meetings and on conference calls. Her assistant asked if she was okay. Her CFO suggested she take a vacation. Vivian ignored both of them. Rachel called, furious. What the hell did you do? I don't want to talk about it. Cole called me. Said you walked out and haven't spoken to him in 2 weeks. He told me to leave. He told you to figure out what you want. That's different. Rachel, no, listen to me. I have known you for 15 years. I have watched you sabotage every good thing that's ever happened to you because you're terrified of not being in control. And this? This is you doing it again. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. Explain how walking away from a man who loves you and a kid who adores you is the smart move here. Please. Vivian's throat tightened. I'm going to hurt them. You know I am. Something's going to come up at work, and I'm going to choose wrong, and they're going to get hurt. So choose right. It's not that simple. It literally is. You're just too scared to try. Vivian hung up. She turned her phone off. She went to another meeting, but Rachel's words echoed in her head for days. 3 weeks after walking out of Cole's house, Vivian got the call she'd been waiting for. The overseas expansion was approved. The board wanted her in London within the month to oversee setup. It was everything she'd worked toward, the culmination of years of strategy and effort. She should have been thrilled. Instead, she sat in her office staring at the skyline and felt nothing but empty. Her assistant knocked on the door. Miss Hale, your 4 o'clock is here. Vivian didn't move. Cancel it. Ma'am? Cancel all my meetings for the rest of the day. The assistant hesitated, then nodded and backed out. Vivian stood and walked to the window. Denver spread out below her, gray and cold under winter clouds. Somewhere out there, an hour away, was a small house with faded blue siding, a garage with a hand-painted sign, a little girl who probably hated her now, a man who'd told her he loved her and she'd walked away. Vivian pressed her forehead against the glass. She'd spent her whole life running toward success, building empires, proving she was untouchable. And in the process, she'd made herself completely alone. The realization hit her so hard she had to sit down. She didn't want London. She didn't want another expansion or another merger or another win that meant nothing when she went home to an empty penthouse. She wanted Sunday morning pancakes and terrible snowmen and a 6-year-old who asked a million questions about space. She wanted Cole's hand in hers and his voice reading bedtime stories, and the way he looked at her like she was enough exactly as she was. She wanted to stop running. Vivian grabbed her coat and headed for the elevator. Her assistant called after her, confused, but Vivian didn't stop. She got in her car and drove toward the mountains, her hands shaking on the wheel. She didn't know if Cole would forgive her, didn't know if she'd already destroyed this beyond repair, but she had to try. Because the alternative, spending the rest of her life wondering what could have been, was worse than any failure she'd ever faced. The drive to Cole's house felt longer than it ever had. Vivian white-knuckled the steering wheel through mountain curves, her mind racing faster than the speedometer. Snow had started falling again, light flurries that caught in her headlights and disappeared against the windshield. She hadn't called ahead, hadn't texted. She had no plan beyond showing up and hoping he'd let her explain, hoping she hadn't already ruined everything. When she pulled into his driveway at 6:15, the house was dark except for a single light in the living room window. Cole's truck sat in its usual spot, snow gathering on the hood. Vivian cut the engine and sat there, suddenly paralyzed. What was she supposed to say? "I'm sorry," felt too small. "I love you," felt too late. 3 weeks of silence sat between them like a canyon, and Vivian had no idea how to cross it. She forced herself out of the car before she could talk herself into leaving. The cold bit through her coat immediately. She hadn't dressed for this, still wearing the pencil skirt and heels she'd had on for meetings all day. Her feet were numb by the time she reached the porch. She knocked, waited, heard footsteps inside. The door opened, and Cole stood there in jeans and a faded navy t-shirt, his hair disheveled like he'd been lying down. His expression shifted from surprise to something more guarded when he saw her. "Vivian." "Hi." Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "What are you doing here?" "I needed to talk to you." Cole leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. He didn't invite her in. "It's been 3 weeks." "I know." 3 weeks, Vivian? You said you needed time. I gave you time." "I know. I'm sorry." "Sorry for what exactly? For walking out? For not calling? For acting like what we had didn't matter?" The words hit like slaps, each one deserved. Vivian swallowed hard. "Can I come in?" Cole hesitated, his jaw tight. Then he stepped back and held the door open. The house felt different, colder somehow, even with the fire going. Vivian noticed small changes, a new basket of toys by the couch, Sadie's solar system project hanging on the wall with a gold star sticker in the corner, evidence of life continuing without her. "Where's Sadie?" Vivian asked. "At Emma's. Sleepover." Cole shut the door but didn't move away from it. "You drove all the way here without knowing if I'd even be home?" "I took a chance." "That's new for you." Vivian flinched. "I deserve that." "Yeah, you do." Cole finally moved, walking into the living room but not sitting down. He stood near the fireplace, the same spot where Vivian had first seen him that night months ago. "So talk. That's what you came here for, right?" Vivian's hands were shaking. She shoved them in her coat pockets. They approved the London expansion. Something flickered across Cole's face. "Congratulations." "I turned it down." Cole stared at her. "What?" "I told the board I wasn't relocating, that I'd oversee the project remotely, but I wasn't leaving Denver." "Why would you do that?" "Because I don't want to go to London." Vivian's voice cracked. "I don't want to spend the next 2 years building something that doesn't matter. I want to be here. With you. With Sadie. If you'll still have me." Cole didn't respond immediately. He looked at her like he was trying to figure out if this was real or some kind of trick. "You walked out 3 weeks ago," he said finally. "I told you I loved you, and you left." "I was scared." "I know you were, but that doesn't make it okay." "I know, you're right." "I panicked, and I ran because that's what I always do when things get real, when they start to matter." Vivian took a shaky breath. But I can't keep doing that. I can't keep sabotaging the only good thing in my life because I'm afraid of getting hurt. What changed? Nothing changed. Everything changed. I don't know. Vivian pressed her palms against her eyes. I spent 3 weeks trying to convince myself that walking away was the right call, that I was protecting you and Sadie from the inevitable disaster I'd cause. But all I did was make myself miserable. So you came back because you were miserable? Watichi dasuit kuruwose. No, I came back because I realized something. She lowered her hands and looked at him directly. I've spent my entire adult life believing that success meant being untouchable, that letting people in would make me weak, and maybe that worked when all I cared about was the company. But it doesn't work anymore. Because I met you and I met Sadie, and suddenly everything I thought I wanted feels empty compared to what I could have if I just stopped being so terrified of losing it. Buos ipatamte. Cole's expression softened slightly, but he still didn't move toward her. I can't do this halfway, Vivian. I can't be with someone who's constantly planning their escape route. I know. Sadie can't either. She asked about you every day for 2 weeks, every single day. When's Vivian coming back? Is she mad at us? Did we do something wrong? Do you know how hard it was to explain to a 6-year-old that sometimes adults make stupid decisions and hurt people they care about? Oh, basson toi. Guilt crashed over Vivian like a wave. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt her. But you did. You hurt both of us. Cole's voice was raw. And I get that you were scared. But being scared doesn't give you a free pass to disappear. You're right. It doesn't. Vivian took a step closer. And I can't promise I won't mess up again. I probably will. But I'm asking you to give me a chance to try. To actually try, instead of waiting for it to fall apart. Why should I? Because I love you. The words came out desperate and honest. I love you, and I should have said it 3 weeks ago when you said it first, but I was too much of a coward. I love you, and I love Sadie, and I want to figure out how to make this work without giving up who I am or asking you to give up who you are. Cole closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet. I don't know if I can trust you not to run again. I don't know if I can promise that I won't. Vivian's own eyes were burning. But I can promise I'll try. I can promise that I want this more than I've ever wanted anything, including every deal I've ever closed and every victory I've ever had. I can promise that walking away from you was the worst decision I've ever made. And I've made some spectacularly bad decisions. A sound escaped Cole that was half laugh, half sob. He rubbed a hand over his face. You're killing me here. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing and come here. Vivian crossed the room in 3 strides. Cole caught her, pulling her against his chest, and she buried her face in his shirt and started crying. Really crying, the kind of tears she never let herself shed. Cole's arms tightened around her, and she felt him shaking too. I missed you, he said into her hair. I was so mad at you, and I missed you so much. I missed you too. Every day. Every minute. They stood there holding each other while the fire crackled and snow fell outside, and 3 weeks of hurt slowly started to ease. It didn't disappear. Vivian knew it wouldn't. Not completely, but it became something they could carry together instead of separately. Eventually, Cole pulled back enough to look at her. We need to talk about this. Really talk. Not just say we're okay and ignore the problems. I know. I need to know you're not going to disappear every time things get hard. I'll try not to. But Cole, I'm going to mess up. I'm going to work too much sometimes and miss things I shouldn't miss. I'm still figuring out how to balance all of this. I know, and I'm going to get frustrated when you do. We're going to fight. That's part of this. I hate fighting. Yeah, well, you're going to have to get used to it, because I'm not letting you run away from conflict anymore. We deal with it, together. Vivian nodded, her throat tight. Okay, see? And you need to talk to Sadie. She deserves an apology too. I will. I promise. Cole cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears. I love you. Even when you're being an idiot, I love you. But I need you to actually be here. Not just physically, all of you. I'm here, I'm so here. Vivian kissed him, tasting salt and relief. I'm not going anywhere. They spent the rest of the night talking, really talking, the way they should have weeks ago. Vivian told him about the board meeting, about the pressure she'd been under, about the fear that had driven her to push him away. Cole told her about the nights he'd spent staring at his phone, wanting to call, but not knowing what to say. About explaining to Sadie that sometimes people need space even when it hurts. She thinks it's her fault, Cole admitted. She thinks she asked too many questions or got too attached. Vivian's heart broke. No, it was never her. She's perfect. I know that. You know that. But try explaining that to a 6-year-old who already has abandonment issues because her mom left. I'll fix it. I'll talk to her tomorrow and I'll make it right. She might not forgive you immediately. I know, but I'll keep trying until she does. Cole kissed her forehead. Yeah, you will. They ended up on the couch, tangled together under the blanket Sadie always left behind. Vivian's head rested on Cole's chest, listening to his heartbeat, and for the first time in 3 weeks, she felt like she could breathe. What did your board say when you turned down London? Cole asked. They weren't thrilled, but I restructured the proposal. I'll oversee the expansion remotely, make quarterly trips if needed, but the day-to-day operations will be handled by the team I'm building there. That's a big change. Yeah, but it's the right one. Vivian traced patterns on his shirt. I've spent 10 years putting the company first. I think it's time I put myself first. Put us first. Us, Cole repeated softly. I like the sound of that. Me too, Shane. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other. And when Vivian woke up at 2 a.m. with Cole's arm heavy across her waist, she didn't panic. She didn't calculate exit strategies or think about work waiting in Denver. She just closed her eyes and went back to sleep. Sadie came home the next morning around 10. Vivian heard the front door bang open and Sadie's voice calling out for Cole before she'd even taken her coat off. Dad, Emma's mom said we can go to the planetarium next month if you say it's okay, and I told her yes, but she said I had to ask you. First, so can we... Sadie stopped dead when she walked into the kitchen and saw Vivian sitting at the table with a cup of coffee. The silence was deafening. Sadie looked at Vivian, then at Cole, then back at Vivian. Her expression shifted from surprise to something harder. Hurt. Hi, Sadie, Vivian said quietly. Sadie didn't respond. She turned to Cole. Why is she here? Sadie, that's not polite. I don't care. Why is she here? She left. She's been gone forever. 3 weeks, Cole corrected gently. That's forever. Sadie's eyes were filling with tears. She left and she didn't call and she didn't come see me, and now she's just here like nothing happened? Vivian stood up slowly. You're right. I messed up. You're mean, Sadie said, her voice shaking. I thought you liked us, but you left and you didn't even say goodbye. I know, and I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't fix it. Sadie, Cole started. No. Sadie turned on him. You said she was nice. You said she cared about us, but she doesn't. She only cares about her stupid job. Vivian knelt down, putting herself at Sadie's eye level, even though the little girl wouldn't look at her. You're right. I did put my job first, and that was wrong. I hurt you, and I hurt your dad, and I'm sorrier than I know how to say. Then why'd you do it? Because I was scared. Of what? Vivian swallowed hard. Of loving you too much. Of messing this up and losing you. So I left before that could happen. But that was stupid, because leaving hurt you worse than staying ever could have. Sadie finally looked at her, tears streaming down her face. I don't want you to leave again. I'm not going to. You promise? I promise I'm going to try my absolute hardest not to. And if I ever have to go somewhere for work, I'll tell you first. I'll explain why and when I'm coming back. No more disappearing. Sadie wiped her nose on her sleeve. Emma's stepmom never leaves without saying goodbye, even when she goes on trips. Then I'll do the same thing. Deal? Sadie considered this. Then, without warning, she launched herself at Vivian, wrapping her arms around her neck and crying into her shoulder. Vivian held her tight, her own tears falling into Sadie's hair. I missed you, Sadie sobbed. I missed you too, so much. Don't be mean anymore. I won't, I promise. Cole watched them, his arms crossed but his expression soft. When Sadie finally pulled back, she looked at Vivian seriously. "You have to help me with my book report. You promised." Beat. Vivian laughed through her tears. "Yeah, I'll help with your book report. And you have to come to the planetarium with us." "Absolutely. And you have to stay for dinner tonight. If your dad says it's okay." Sadie looked at Cole expectantly. He smiled. "Yeah, she can stay for dinner." Sadie nodded, satisfied. Then she grabbed Vivian's hand and dragged her toward the living room. "Come on. I got a new book about black holes and it's really cool, but some of the words are hard." Vivian let herself be pulled along, catching Cole's eye as they passed. He mouthed "thank you," and she mouthed back "I love you." They spent the rest of the day the way they used to. Sadie read aloud from her library book, stopping every few sentences to ask questions or point out pictures. Vivian helped her sound out difficult words and explained concepts in ways a 6-year-old could understand. Cole made grilled cheese sandwiches for lunch, and they ate on the living room floor surrounded by books and drawings. It felt normal, easy, like the last 3 weeks had been a bad dream Vivian had finally woken up from. But that night, after Sadie went to bed, reality settled in again. Vivian and Cole sat on the porch, bundled in jackets and sharing a beer, watching snow fall in the yard. The temperature had dropped, and Vivian could see her breath in the air. "What happens now?" Cole asked. "What do you mean?" "I mean the practical stuff. You're in Denver during the week. I'm here. How do we make that work?" Well, Vivian had been thinking about this. "I could come up more during the week, maybe Tuesdays and Thursdays. Stay over, leave early for work." "That's a lot of driving." "I don't mind. What about when Sadie has school stuff, recitals, parent-teacher conferences, that kind of thing? You tell me when they are, and I'll be there. I'll block the time on my calendar." Cole turned to look at her. "And if work conflicts?" "Then work will have to wait." "You say that now." "I mean it." Vivian set down her beer. "I'm not saying I'll never have emergencies or last-minute meetings, but I'm going to try to keep those to a minimum. And when they do happen, I'll communicate. I'll tell you what's going on instead of just disappearing into work mode." "I can work with that." "Yeah?" "Yeah." Cole pulled her closer. "I'm not asking you to give up your career, Viv. I just need to know we're a priority, that Sadie's a priority. You are, both of you, I promise." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind in the trees and the distant sound of a plow clearing the main road. Vivian leaned against Cole's shoulder and thought about how different this felt from every other relationship she'd ever attempted. With other people, there'd always been an endpoint she could see coming, a natural expiration date when work got too demanding or the person got tired of being second place. With Cole, she didn't see an endpoint. She saw years stretching out ahead of them, full of school plays and business trips and arguments about who forgot to buy milk. She saw Sadie growing up, saw herself becoming part of their lives in ways that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "I want to meet your family," Cole said suddenly. Vivian pulled back to look at him. "What?" "Your family, your parents, whoever's important to you. If we're doing this for real, I want to meet them." Vivian's stomach twisted. "That's complicated." "Why?" "My dad and I don't really talk. Haven't in a few years." "What happened?" Vivian sighed. "He didn't approve of some business decisions I made. Thought I was being too aggressive, too risky. We had a huge fight and we haven't really spoken since. My mom died when I was in college, so it's just him and me. Or it was. Now it's mostly just me." "That's sad." "It is what it is. Maybe you should reach out. Life's too short to stay mad." "He's the one who's mad, not me." Vivian. "What? You're scared of him too, aren't you? Same way you were scared of this." Vivian wanted to argue, but she couldn't. Cole was right. Her relationship with her father was just another thing she'd walked away from rather than deal with the mess. "Maybe," she admitted, "but that's different. He made it clear he didn't want to be part of my life anymore." "Did he? Or did you just stop trying?" Vivian didn't have an answer for that. Cole kissed the top of her head. "Think about it. That's all I'm saying." The following week fell into a new rhythm. Vivian drove up Tuesday after work and stayed until Wednesday morning. She worked from Cole's kitchen table while Sadie did homework and Cole handled paperwork from the garage. It was cramped and chaotic and nothing like her sleek downtown office, but Vivian found she didn't mind. Thursday, she came back and stayed through the weekend. Friday night, they had dinner as a family, a word that still felt foreign in Vivian's mouth but was starting to feel right. Saturday morning, they took Sadie to her soccer game, and Vivian sat in the freezing bleachers cheering along with the other parents, most of whom gave her curious looks but were too polite to ask questions. Sunday, they went to the planetarium. Sadie was beside herself with excitement, dragging Vivian from exhibit to exhibit and explaining everything she already knew about planets and stars and black holes. Cole followed behind, taking pictures on his phone and smiling at Vivian every time she caught his eye. They bought Sadie a telescope in the gift shop. Not an expensive one, just a beginner model, but Sadie treated it like they'd given her the moon itself. She hugged it the entire drive home and insisted on setting it up in the backyard the moment they arrived, even though it was still daylight. "We can't see anything yet," Cole explained. "I know, but I want it ready for tonight." That evening, after dinner, they bundled up and went outside. Cole helped Sadie position the telescope while Vivian stood nearby, hands shoved in her pockets, watching them work together with the easy familiarity of years. "Okay," Cole said. "Try it now." Sadie pressed her eye to the lens and gasped. "I can see the moon! Dad, I can actually see it!" "Yeah? Yeah, it's got spots and everything. Vivian, come look." Vivian looked through the telescope and saw the moon's cratered surface in imperfect detail. It wasn't the clearest image. The telescope was cheap, and Sadie kept jostling it, but it was real. Tangible proof that something vast and distant could be pulled closer if you just looked hard enough. "It's beautiful," Vivian said. "I'm going to find Saturn next," Sadie announced. "Emma said you can see the rings if you have a good telescope." "This one might not be quite good enough for that," Cole warned. "Then we'll get a better one someday." Someday. Like it was a given. Like Vivian would still be here in 6 months or a year, or however long it took. Cole must have seen something in her expression because he slipped his hand into hers and squeezed. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "Yeah," Vivian said. "I really am." The problems didn't magically disappear. 2 weeks later, Vivian had a crisis at work, a contractor backing out of a major project, leaving her scrambling to find a replacement before deadlines hit. She spent 3 days practically living at her office, surviving on coffee and takeout, missing 2 dinners she'd promised to be at. When she finally made it to Cole's house Thursday night, exhausted and guilty, she found him in the garage working on an engine. "I'm sorry," she said from the doorway. Cole wiped his hands on a rag, not looking at her. "You said you'd be here Tuesday." "I know. Work blew up and I couldn't You couldn't take 5 minutes to call?" I texted. "A text isn't the same as a conversation, Vivian." Cole finally looked at her, and she saw the frustration in his eyes. "I'm not mad that you had to work. I'm mad that you went radio silent again. Do you know how much that freaked me out after everything?" Mom. Vivian's defenses rose automatically. "It was 3 days, not 3 weeks. Yeah, and 3 days is all it takes to start wondering if you're pulling away again. That's not fair. You can't hold one mistake over my head forever." "I'm not. I'm asking you to communicate. That's it. That's all I want." They stared at each other across the garage. They stared at each, tension crackling between them. Vivian wanted to snap back, to defend herself, to win the argument the way she won everything else. But Cole had asked her not to run from conflict, to actually deal with it. So she took a breath and forced herself to hear what he was actually saying. "You're right," she said. "I should have called. I got caught up in crisis mode and I forgot that you were waiting to hear from me. That's on me." Some of the anger drained from Cole's expression. "Thank you. It won't happen again." "It probably will. But as long as you try, that's what matters." Sorry. "I'm trying. I know it doesn't always look like it, but I am." Cole crossed the garage and pulled her into a hug despite the grease on his hands. "I know, and I'm trying too. Trying not to assume the worst every time you get busy." "We're a mess, Vivian mumbled into his shirt. "Yeah, but we're figuring it out." Sadie appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas even though it was almost 8. Are you guys fighting? We were, Cole said, but we're done now. Good, because Vivian promised to help me with my book report, and it's due Monday, and I haven't started. Vivian pulled back, laughing despite everything. You haven't started? I was waiting for you. Sadie, that's not, Cole started. It's fine, Vivian interrupted. Come on, let's go look at what you've got so far. They spent the next 2 hours working on the report. Sadie had chosen Sally Ride, and Vivian helped her organize facts into paragraphs that made sense. Cole made hot chocolate and sat nearby, interjecting occasionally when Sadie got stuck on a word. By the time Sadie finished her rough draft, it was past bedtime. Cole carried her to her room while she protested that she wasn't even tired, even though she was already half asleep against his shoulder. Vivian cleaned up the scattered papers and pencils, and when Cole came back, they collapsed on the couch together. Sorry about earlier, Cole said. Don't be. You were right. Still, I could have handled it better. We're learning, Vivian said. Both of us. Cole kissed her, slow and sweet, and Vivian felt the last of the tension drain away. This was what she'd been running from for so long, the vulnerability of letting someone see her mess up and choosing to stay anyway. It was terrifying and uncomfortable and nothing like the controlled environment she preferred. But it was also real in a way nothing else in her life had ever been. Her phone buzzed. Vivian ignored it. It buzzed again and again. Cole pulled back. You should check that. It can wait. Vivian. She sighed and grabbed her phone. 3 texts from her assistant, each one more urgent than the last. A problem with the London team. A decision needed immediately. Vivian stared at the screen, torn between the crisis waiting in her inbox and the man sitting next to her. Go ahead, Cole said. I know you need to. Are you sure? Yeah, just tell me what's going on instead of disappearing into work brain. So Vivian explained the situation while she typed out responses. Cole listened and asked questions and didn't make her feel guilty for having to deal with it. When she finally set the phone down 20 minutes later, the problem was handled and Cole was still there, patient and understanding. Thank you, Vivian said. For what? For not making me choose. You shouldn't have to choose. That's the whole point. Vivian leaned against him, exhausted but content. Outside, snow was falling again, covering the yard in fresh white. The telescope still sat where they'd left it, pointed at a sky full of stars they couldn't see yet, but knew were there. And for the first time in her life, Vivian wasn't planning her next move or calculating risks or building escape routes. She was just here, present, trying. And that, she was learning, was enough. 3 months later, Vivian woke up in Cole's bed on a Saturday morning to find Sadie standing next to her, fully dressed and holding a backpack. We're going camping, Sadie announced. Vivian squinted at the clock. 6:30. What? Dad said we're going camping today. He's making pancakes. You have to get up. Sadie, let her sleep, Cole called from the kitchen. She's awake now. Vivian groaned and sat up. Camping? Since when? Sadie was already halfway out the door. Since Dad said we needed an adventure. Come on! Cole appeared in the doorway, holding a spatula and looking sheepish. I was going to tell you over breakfast. We're going camping. Yeah, I know it's last minute, but the weather's supposed to be perfect, and Sadie's been asking for weeks. I figured we could make it a thing. I don't camp, Cole. You do now. He grinned. Come on. It'll be good for you. When's the last time you spent a night without cell service? Never. That's called a nightmare. That's called disconnecting. You'll survive. Vivian wanted to argue, but Sadie was already shouting about s'mores from the kitchen, and Cole was looking at her with that expression he got when he knew she'd say yes, even though she didn't want to. Fine, Vivian muttered, but I'm bringing my laptop. No laptops. That's the rule. Cole, no laptops. 2 hours later, they were driving into the mountains with the truck bed full of camping gear Vivian didn't know Cole owned. Sadie sat between them, chattering nonstop about bears and campfires and whether they'd see any shooting stars. Vivian stared out the window and tried not to think about the 3 emails she'd left unanswered. The campsite was deep in the woods, tucked along a stream that rushed over rocks and fallen logs. No other campers. No cell signal, just trees and water and sky. Vivian stood next to the truck, looking at the tent bag Cole had dumped at her feet. "You want me to help set this up?" she said. "Yeah. I've never set up a tent in my life at the good time to learn." Sadie was already exploring the area, climbing on rocks and shrieking with delight every time she found something interesting. Cole pulled poles out of the bag and started laying them out in the dirt. "Okay," he said. "So this is pretty straightforward. You just have to... There's no instructions. Don't need instructions. It's intuitive." Vivian stared at the pile of canvas and poles. Nothing about this is intuitive. But she helped anyway, following Cole's directions while Sadie supervised and offered completely unhelpful suggestions. They got the tent upright eventually, though it leaned slightly to the left and the door didn't quite zip all the way. "It's perfect," Sadie declared. "It's a disaster," Vivian said. Cole laughed and kissed the top of her head. "It's character building. Oh, c'est pas." They spent the afternoon hiking a trail that wound through the trees and ended at a waterfall Sadie insisted on climbing right up to, despite Cole's protests. Vivian took pictures on her phone, the only function that worked without service, and tried not to panic about being completely unreachable. By the time they made it back to camp, the sun was starting to set. Cole built a fire while Vivian and Sadie gathered sticks for roasting hot dogs. Sadie narrated the entire process, explaining the correct way to roast a hot dog and the proper marshmallow to chocolate ratio for s'mores. "You're very particular about food," Vivian observed. "Dad says I have standards." That's one word for it. They ate dinner sitting on logs around the fire. Sadie's hot dog fell into the flames twice before she finally got one cooked to her satisfaction. Vivian burned her first marshmallow completely and had to start over. Cole sat back and watched them with an expression that made Vivian's chest ache in the best way. "What?" she asked. "Nothing, just happy." "Because we're burning food in the woods?" "Because you're here, both of you, eat." Sadie leaned against Cole's side, chocolate smeared on her face. "This is the best day ever." "Yeah?" Cole asked. "Yeah. Can we do this every weekend?" "Let's start with surviving tonight first." After Sadie went to bed, reluctantly, insisting she wasn't tired even though she could barely keep her eyes open, Vivian and Cole stayed by the fire. The woods were quiet except for the stream and the occasional crack of burning wood. Stars filled the sky in a way Vivian never saw in the city. "You were right," she said. "About what?" "This. I needed this." Vivian pulled her jacket tighter. "I didn't realize how much I needed to just stop for a minute. You're always going 100 miles an hour. Sometimes you have to pull over and breathe." "I'm not good at that." "I noticed." Cole poked at the fire with a stick. "But you're getting better." Vivian thought about the last 3 months. The fights they'd had, real ones, where they yelled and said things they regretted and had to figure out how to fix it afterward. The compromises they'd made. The way she'd slowly learned to let Sadie and Cole into parts of her life she'd always kept separate. Last month, she'd brought them to a company event, a fundraiser she was required to attend, full of investors and executives and people who'd looked at Cole like they couldn't figure out what he was doing there. Cole had worn a suit that didn't quite fit and made small talk with billionaires about engine repair, and Vivian had never been prouder of anyone in her life. Sadie had charmed everyone, asking the CEO of a competing firm if he had any kids, and then explaining her entire solar system project when he said yes. By the end of the night, 3 different people had asked Vivian how long she'd been a mother. She hadn't corrected them. "I got an offer this week," Vivian said suddenly. Cole looked at her. "What kind of offer?" From a firm in New York. They want to acquire Hale Industries. The number they're talking about it's more money than I ever thought I'd see." "Would you tell them?" "That I'd think about it." Cole was quiet for a moment. The fire popped, sending sparks into the dark. "Do you want to sell?" "I don't know. Part of me does. I built this company from nothing, and the idea of walking away with that kind of payout is tempting. I could retire, do whatever I wanted. But I don't know who I am without the company. I've spent 15 years building it, It's been the most important thing in my life for so long. Not anymore, though, Cole said quietly. Vivian looked at him. No, not anymore. So what are you going to do? I don't know. That's the problem. For the first time in my life, I don't have a plan. I don't know what I want. Cole reached for her hand. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe you don't have to know right now. I'm not good with uncertainty. Yeah, I've noticed that too. He smiled. But you're learning. They sat in silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. The stream kept rushing over rocks, constant and unchanging. I think I want to talk to my dad, Vivian said. Cole's hand tightened on hers. Yeah? Yeah, you were right. Life's too short to stay mad, or scared, or whatever I've been. You want me to come with you? What? Well. Vivian's throat tightened. Would you? Of course. You're not doing this alone. The next week, Vivian called her father. She sat in her penthouse, staring at his contact information for 20 minutes before she finally hit dial. The phone rang 4 times. She was about to hang up when he answered. Vivian? His voice was the same, deep, formal, with that edge of Boston accent he'd never quite lost. Hi, Dad. Silence. Then, this is unexpected. I know. I'm sorry it's been so long. 2.5 years. Vivian closed her eyes. Yeah, 2.5 years. What changed? I met someone. He made me realize I've been running from a lot of things. You were one of them. Her father was quiet. Vivian could picture him in his study, surrounded by books and awards and photos of her mother. He'd be wearing reading glasses he claimed he didn't need, a cup of coffee going cold on his desk. I'd like to see you, Vivian, Vivian said. If that's okay. When? This weekend? I could drive to Boston, bring someone with me. The someone you met. Yeah. And his daughter. Another pause. He has a daughter. She's 6. Her name's Sadie. You're serious about this, man? It wasn't a question, but Vivian answered anyway. Very serious. Then I'd like to meet him, and Sadie. Come Saturday. I'll make dinner. Vivian's eyes burned. Okay, thank you. Vivian? Yeah? I'm glad you called. Iyigi. She couldn't speak past the lump in her throat, so she just said, me too, and hung up before she started crying. Cole found her 10 minutes later, still sitting on the couch with the phone in her hand. You okay? He asked. I called my dad. How'd it go? We're having dinner with him on Saturday in Boston. Cole sat down next to her. That's good, right? I think so. I don't know. I'm terrified. Of what? That he'll hate you. That he'll judge me for turning down the New York offer if I mention it. That I don't know. That it'll be awful and I'll remember why we stopped talking in the first place. Or maybe it'll be fine. Maybe he misses you as much as you miss him, and this will be the start of fixing things. When did you become such an optimist? Cole smiled. Someone's got to balance out your catastrophizing. Saturday came too fast. They drove to Boston in Vivian's car because Cole's truck wasn't reliable for long distances. Sadie sat in the back, reading a book about astronauts and asking questions every 5 minutes. Vivian's hands were sweating on the steering wheel. You're freaking out, Cole observed. I'm not. You've changed lanes 4 times in the last mile. I'm just trying to find the fastest route. Vivian, Iske. She glanced at him. Okay, I'm freaking out. What if this is a disaster? Then we'll deal with it, together. What if he's mean to you? I'm a grown man. I can handle someone being mean to me. What if he makes Sadie uncomfortable? Then we'll leave. It's dinner, not a life sentence. Sadie looked up from her book. Is your dad scary? No, Vivian said quickly. Then, maybe a little, but only because he's very smart and very serious. That's okay. I'm smart too. But Cole laughed. Yes, you are. Vivian's father lived in the same house she'd grown up in. A colonial in Cambridge with a garden her mother had loved and a study where her father had spent most of his time. Vivian pulled into the driveway and sat there, staring at the front door. Ready? Cole asked. No. Good. Let's go anyway. What? Her father answered the door before they even knocked. He looked older than Vivian remembered, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes, but he stood straight and tall, still wearing the same kind of cardigan he'd always favored. Vivian? He said. Hi, Dad. They stared at each other for a moment. Then her father opened his arms and Vivian stepped into them, breathing in the familiar smell of coffee and old books. I missed you, he said quietly. I missed you too. He pulled back and looked at Cole and Sadie. You must be Cole. Cole extended his hand. Yes, sir. Thank you for having us. They shook hands, and Vivian watched her father assess Cole the way he'd always assessed everyone, quick, thorough, missing nothing. And this is Sadie, Vivian said, putting her hand on the little girl's shoulder. Sadie looked up at Vivian's father without a trace of shyness. You're Vivian's dad. She said you're really smart. Did she now? Yeah, are you a scientist? No, I was a professor. I taught economics. What's economics? The study of how people use resources. Sadie considered this. Like how Dad decides which tools to buy for the garage? Vivian's father smiled, actually smiled. Yes, exactly like that. Bolt. Dinner was less awkward than Vivian feared. Her father asked Cole about his business and actually listened to the answers. He asked Sadie about school and seemed genuinely interested when she launched into an explanation of her latest science project. He asked Vivian about the company, and she found herself telling him about the New York offer. Are you considering it? Her father asked. I don't know. It's a lot of money. Money isn't everything. JC, you used to say money was how you kept score. I used to say a lot of things I shouldn't have. Her father set down his fork. I was too hard on you, Vivian. I pushed you to be successful, and then I criticized you when you were too successful. That wasn't fair. Vivian felt tears prick her eyes. I thought you were disappointed in me. Never disappointed. Worried, maybe. I watched you build this empire, and I saw how much of yourself you sacrificed for it. I didn't want you to end up alone like I did after your mother died. You're not alone. I was. For a long time. Until tonight. They talked for hours. About her mother, about the company, about the years they'd wasted being too stubborn to reach out. Sadie fell asleep on the couch around 9, and Cole carried her to the guest room her father had prepared just in case. Later, while Cole was upstairs reading Sadie a bedtime story in a strange house, Vivian and her father sat in his study. He's good for you, her father said. Yeah, he is. And the little girl, you love her. So much it scares me sometimes. Her father nodded. That's what love does. It terrifies you, and it's worth every moment of terror. He paused. Your mother would have liked them. Vivian's breath caught. You think so? I know so. She always said you needed someone who saw you for who you were, not what you'd accomplished. Cole sees you. Yeah, he does. So what are you going to do about New York? Turn it down, probably. I don't want to sell. I just wanted to know what it was worth. And now you know. Now I know. Vivian looked around the study, at the photos on the walls and the books stacked everywhere. I'm sorry I stayed away so long. I'm sorry I gave you a reason to. They hugged again, and this time Vivian didn't pull away quickly. She held on and let herself be held, and some old wound she'd been carrying finally started to heal. When they drove back to Denver the next day, Sadie talked nonstop about how nice Vivian's dad was and how he'd promised to send her a book about economics if she wrote him a letter. Cole drove while Vivian dozed in the passenger seat, exhausted but lighter than she'd felt in years. That went well, Cole said. Better than well. It was perfect. Not perfect. Your dad burned the roast. Okay, almost perfect. Cole smiled and reached for her hand. Vivian laced their fingers together and watched the highway roll past, and for once, she wasn't thinking about where they were going. She was just grateful for where they were. Back in Denver, real life reasserted itself quickly. Vivian had a board meeting on Tuesday where she officially turned down the New York offer. Some members were supportive. Others thought she was making a mistake. Her CFO pulled her aside afterward and asked if she was sure. Positive, Vivian said. This was a lot of money, Vivian. I know, but I don't need it. The company's stable. We're growing. I'm happy with where we are. And this has nothing to do with your mechanic boyfriend. Oh, Vivian smiled. It has everything to do with my mechanic boyfriend and his daughter, and the life I'm building that's bigger than just balance sheets and acquisitions. Her CFO shook his head, but he was smiling too. Never thought I'd see the day. Yeah, me neither. That weekend, Vivian drove up to Cole's place for what she thought would be a normal weekend. She found him in the garage, but instead of working on a car, he was building something out of wood. What's that? She asked. Cole looked up, sawdust in his hair. Bookshelf. For Sadie's room. She's outgrowing the old one. Need help? Actually, yeah, can you hold this steady? Vivian spent the next 2 hours helping Cole assemble the bookshelf. They argued about measurements and whether the shelves were level, and why the instructions seemed to be missing an entire step. By the time they finished, they were both covered in sawdust and laughing. We're terrible at this, Vivian said. Speak for yourself. This is a work of art. It's leaning to the left. Character. They carried it into Sadie's room together. Sadie was at Emma's, so they had the house to themselves. Cole set the bookshelf against the wall, and they both stepped back to admire it. Not bad, Vivian admitted. See? I told you. Cole turned to, and something in his expression made Vivian's heart skip. What? She asked. I want to ask you something. Okay? But I need you to not freak out. Vivian's stomach dropped. You're really selling this well. Cole laughed, nervous. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Vivian stopped breathing. I know this is fast, Cole said, and I know you're probably going to say it's too soon and we should wait and be practical. But I don't want to wait. I love you. Sadie loves you. You're already part of our family, and I want to make it official. He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, with a small diamond that caught the light. Will you marry me? Cole asked. Vivian stared at him, at the ring, at the bookshelf they'd just built together, imperfect and leaning but solid. Every logical part of her brain screamed that this was too fast. They'd only been together 8 months. There were complications to work out, logistics to figure out, a million reasons to wait. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was, yes. And, Cole blinked. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. Really? Vivian laughed, tears streaming down her face. Yes, really. Put the ring on before I change my mind. Cole slipped the ring on her finger with shaking hands. It fit perfectly. Then he kissed her, and Vivian kissed him back. And they stood there in Sadie's room, surrounded by books and toys and the life they were building together. We should tell Sadie, Vivian said when they finally broke apart. She already knows. What? Cole grinned. She helped me pick out the ring. She's been asking when I was going to propose for the last month. She made me promise to do it before her birthday so she could tell Emma you were going to be her stepmom. Vivian started laughing and couldn't stop. Cole joined in, and they collapsed on Sadie's bed, holding each other and laughing until their sides hurt. When Sadie came home an hour later and saw the ring, she screamed so loud the neighbors probably heard. I knew it, she yelled, jumping up and down. Emma, I told you he was going to do it. I told you. Emma's mom waved from the driveway, smiling. Sadie threw herself at Vivian. You're going to be my mom now. Stepmom, Vivian corrected gently. Same thing. Can I be in the wedding? Can I wear a fancy dress? Can we have a big cake? Yes to all of that, Cole said. Can we tell Grandpa? Vivian's dad? I want to call him. Vivian's throat tightened. Yeah, let's call him. They did, right there in the living room. Vivian's father answered on the second ring, and Sadie announced the engagement before Vivian could say hello. She said yes, Sadie yelled into the phone. Dad asked her and she said yes, and now we're going to be a real family. Vivian took the phone, her face burning. Hi, Dad. Congratulations, sweetheart. I'm very happy for you. Thanks. It's kind of sudden. The best things usually are. That night, after Sadie finally went to bed, still talking about wedding dresses and cakes, and whether they could get married in winter so it would snow, Vivian and Cole sat on the porch. No second thoughts? Cole asked. About 100, but I'm doing it anyway. That's my girl. Vivian looked at the ring on her finger. It felt foreign and right at the same time. I don't know how to be a wife or a stepmom. I'm going to mess this up constantly. Probably, I'm going to mess it up too. That's part of the deal. What if I get so focused on work that I forget our anniversary? Then I'll remind you. What if I leave dirty socks on the floor and it drives you crazy? Then I'll learn to live with it or buy you a hamper. What if we fight in front of Sadie? Then we'll show her that people who love each other can disagree and still be okay. Vivian leaned against him. When did you get so wise? Oh, I'm winging it just as much as you are. They sat there in the cold, watching stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Somewhere inside, Sadie's telescope sat by her window, ready for the next clear night. In the garage, projects waited to be finished. In Denver, a company waited for decisions only Vivian could make. But right now, none of that mattered. Right now, Vivian was exactly where she needed to be. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't planning her escape route. She was planning her future. They decided to get married in December, exactly 1 year after that first night in the restaurant when Vivian had stumbled in 40 minutes late, and Cole had asked if she was okay instead of why she'd kept him waiting. Sadie insisted on being involved in every single decision. She had opinions about flowers, about cake flavors, about whether the ceremony should be inside or outside. Most of her opinions contradicted each other. She wanted a winter wedding with snow, but also wanted it warm enough too. Wear a sleeveless dress. But Vivian found herself caring more about making Sadie happy than about the wedding itself. Rachel flew in from Boston 2 weeks before the ceremony to help with final preparations. She took one look at Vivian, who was buried under fabric swatches and seating charts in Cole's living room, and started laughing. What? Vivian asked. You. Planning a wedding. I never thought I'd see the day. It's not that different from planning a corporate event. Vivian, you're comparing your wedding to a corporate event. I'm just saying the organizational principles are similar. I am Balchim Nchokus. Rachel sat down next to her and picked up a guest list. Who are all these people? Friends, family, some colleagues? You invited your entire board of directors? Not all of them, just the ones I actually like. How many is that? Vivian grinned. 3. Cole came in from the garage, wiping grease off his hands. He kissed the top of Vivian's head and nodded at Rachel. She driving you crazy yet? Always, Rachel said, but I wouldn't have it any other way. But where's Sadie? Vivian asked. At Emma's. Again. I think she's been at Emma's more than here this week. She's avoiding the wedding chaos. Smart kid. She's your kid now too, Cole pointed out. The words still caught Vivian off guard sometimes. In 2 weeks, she'd be Sadie's stepmother. Legally, officially, permanently. The responsibility of it terrified her, but not enough to make her run anymore. The next day, Vivian took Sadie dress shopping. Just the two of them, because Sadie had very specific ideas about what she wanted and didn't want anyone else's input. It has to twirl, Sadie explained seriously as they walked into the store. And it has to be sparkly, but not too sparkly, because Emma's cousin had a dress that was too sparkly, and it looked like a disco ball. Got it. Twirly and appropriately sparkly. They tried on 15 dresses. Sadie rejected most of them immediately. Wrong color, wrong length, not enough twirl. The saleswoman was losing patience until Vivian pulled her aside and quietly slipped her an extra $100 to keep bringing options. Finally, Sadie found it. A deep blue dress with silver embroidery that caught the light when she spun. She twirled 3 times in front of the mirror, watching the skirt flare out, and her face lit up. This one, she said. You sure? Positive. While the saleswoman packaged the dress, Sadie looked at Vivian seriously. Can I ask you something? She said. Of course. After you and Dad get married, are you going to leave? Vivian's heart stopped. What? No, why would you think that? Because my real mom left, and I thought maybe that's what moms do. Vivian knelt down so they were eye level. The store bustled around them, but all she could see was Sadie's face, uncertain and young and trying so hard to be brave. Listen to me, Vivian said. I'm not going anywhere, not ever. Your mom leaving had nothing to do with you, and it definitely doesn't mean that's what all moms do. But what if you change your mind? I won't. How do you know? Because I love you. and I love your dad, and I've never been more sure of anything in my entire life. Vivian took Sadie's hands. I'm going to mess up sometimes. I'm going to work too much and forget things and probably embarrass you when you're a teenager, but I will never, ever leave you. Okay? Sadie's eyes filled with tears. Promise? I promise. Sadie threw her arms around Vivian's neck and held on tight. Vivian hugged her back and several shoppers smiled at them as they passed. Can I call you Mom? Sadie whispered. Vivian's throat closed up. If you want to. You don't have to. I want to. Sadie pulled back, but only after the wedding. Because that's when it's official. Deal on... They bought the dress and stopped for ice cream on the way home. Sadie got chocolate with sprinkles and talked nonstop about the wedding and school and whether they could get a dog now that they were going to be a real family. Vivian said maybe, which Sadie immediately interpreted as yes. Dad's going to be so mad at you, Sadie said gleefully. Probably. Don't tell him yet. Too late. I'm telling him the second we get home. True to her word, Sadie burst through the door yelling about dogs before Vivian had even parked the car. Cole gave Vivian a look that said, we're going to talk about this later, but he was smiling. The week before the wedding, Vivian's CFO resigned. She got the email at 7 in the morning while drinking coffee at Cole's kitchen table. She read it 3 times, certain she was misunderstanding, but the words didn't change. Cole found her staring at her laptop, her coffee forgotten and going cold. What's wrong? He asked. My CFO just quit. 2 weeks' notice, right before the wedding. Can he do that? Technically, yes, but the timing is... Vivian rubbed her temples. This is going to be a nightmare. We're in the middle of the London expansion. He knows every detail of that project. What are you going to do? I don't know. Find a replacement, I guess. Fast. Sasios. Cole sat down across from her. Do you need to postpone the wedding? Vivian looked up sharply. What? No. I'm just saying if you need to... Cole, we're getting married in 8 days. I'm not postponing because work got complicated. Okay, just wanted to make sure. I'm sure. Vivian closed her laptop. This is work. It's important, but it's not more important than us. I'll figure it out. She spent the next 3 days interviewing potential replacements while simultaneously finalizing wedding details. Her assistant thought she was losing her mind. Her board thought she should postpone. Even Rachel suggested maybe moving the date back a month or 2. No, Vivian said firmly. The wedding happens as planned. I'll have a new CFO in place before then, or I'll handle it myself temporarily. You can't do everything yourself, Rachel argued. Watch me. But by Thursday, Vivian was exhausted. She'd interviewed 7 candidates and none of them felt right. The London team was panicking without the CFO's guidance. 3 different fires had erupted at work that all needed her immediate attention. She was driving to Cole's house after another 16-hour day when her phone rang. Her father. Hi, Dad. You sound terrible. Thanks. Love you too. What's wrong? Vivian explained about the CFO, about the interviews, about trying to hold everything together while planning a wedding. Her father listened quietly. Then he said, Do you remember what your mother used to say about control? That trying to control everything is just another way of being afraid. Exactly. You're trying to handle this alone because you're afraid of what happens if you can't. But you don't have to do it alone anymore. You have Cole, you have me. You have a whole company full of people who could step up if you let them. I know, it's just hard to let go. I know it is. But maybe that's what this is teaching you. That you're stronger when you ask for help than when you try to carry everything yourself. Vivian pulled into Cole's driveway and sat there with the engine running. When did you get so wise? I've always been this wise. You just weren't listening before. She found Cole and Sadie in the living room, working on a puzzle. Sadie looked up when Vivian walked in. You look tired, she said. I am tired. Dad made soup. You should eat some. In a minute. Vivian sat down on the floor next to them. Can I tell you guys something? Of course, Cole said. I'm really scared that I'm going to fail at this. At being a wife and a stepmom and running a company and keeping all the pieces together. And I know I'm not supposed to be able to do everything, but I keep trying anyway because I don't know how to stop. Sadie looked at her seriously. Emma's stepmom says you can't do everything perfect. She says you just have to do your best and that's good enough. Emma's stepmom sounds smart. She is. She's a doctor and she still forgets stuff sometimes. Last week she forgot to pick Emma up from dance class. Cole reached over and took Vivian's hand. You don't have to be perfect. And you just have to be here. I am here. I know. And that's enough. Vivian looked at both of them. Cole with his patient smile, Sadie with her gap-toothed grin and puzzle pieces scattered around her, and felt something inside her finally settle. She didn't have to do this alone. She didn't have to be perfect. She just had to keep showing up and trying and letting people help when she needed it. Okay, she said, I'm going to promote someone internally for CFO, and I'm going to delegate more, and I'm going to stop checking my email after 8 p.m. Really? Cole asked. Really, starting now. Vivian pulled out her phone and turned it off completely. There, done. Sadie clapped. Can we eat soup now? I'm starving. They ate soup together, and Vivian didn't think about work once. She listened to Sadie explain her science project and laughed when Cole told a story about a customer who'd tried to fix his own transmission and made it infinitely worse. She helped clean up dinner and read bedtime stories and fell asleep in Cole's bed without once checking to see if she'd missed any important emails. The wedding day arrived cold and clear. Snow had fallen overnight, covering everything in fresh white that sparkled in the morning sun. Vivian woke up in a hotel room in Aspen, the same one where she'd stayed that first night before meeting Cole, with Rachel snoring softly in the other bed. Her phone showed dozens of messages, good luck wishes from colleagues, excitement from friends, a long text from her father about how proud he was, and one from Cole, sent at 6 in the morning. Can't wait to marry you. See you at 4. Don't be late. Vivian smiled and typed back, I'm always late. You should know that by now. Yeah, I do. Love you anyway. Rachel woke up and immediately went into drill sergeant mode, making sure Vivian ate breakfast and drank water and didn't spiral into pre-wedding panic. They spent the morning getting ready, hair, makeup, helping each other into their dresses. Vivian's was simple, elegant, nothing like the elaborate gowns she'd looked at in magazines. It felt right. At 3:30, her father knocked on the door. He was wearing a suit Vivian remembered from her childhood, altered slightly to fit his older frame. You look beautiful, he said. Thanks, Dad. Your mother would be so happy right now. Vivian's eyes filled with tears. Rachel immediately swooped in with tissues. Don't you dare cry yet, Rachel said. You'll ruin your makeup. Too late. Her father offered his arm. Ready? Yeah, I really am. They decided on the restaurant where they'd first met. The staff had transformed it into something magical. Candles everywhere, white flowers, the fireplace crackling exactly like it had that first night. Guests filled the space, but Vivian barely saw them. All she saw was Cole, standing at the front near the fireplace in a suit that actually fit, his hair neatly combed for once, looking at her like she was the only person in the world. And next to him, Sadie in her blue dress, holding a basket of flower petals and grinning so wide her face might split. The ceremony itself was short. They'd written their own vows, and Vivian's hands shook as she read hers. Cole, a year ago, I walked through those doors expecting disappointment. Instead, I found someone who saw past all the armor I wore and decided I was worth waiting for anyway. You taught me that being strong doesn't mean being alone, that letting people in doesn't make me weak, that love isn't something to be afraid of. It's something to build a life on. I promise to keep showing up, even when I'm scared, to communicate instead of running, to be the partner you deserve and the mother Sadie deserves. I love you, both of you. And I'm so grateful you took a chance on a workaholic billionaire who didn't know the first thing about making a family. Cole's vows were simpler but hit just as hard. Vivian, you walked into my life when I'd stopped believing anyone would ever want both me and Sadie as a package deal. You proved me wrong. You showed up for us even when it was hard, even when you were terrified. You're the strongest person I know, and I'm honored that you trust me enough to let me see the parts of you that aren't strong. I promise to be patient when you work too much, to remind you to breathe, to build a life with you that's bigger than both of us. I love you. Sadie loves you, and we're never letting you go. When the officiant pronounced them married, Cole kissed her, and the room erupted in applause. Sadie threw flower petals everywhere, including directly at them, and Vivian laughed harder than she had in months. The reception was loud and chaotic and perfect. Vivian's board members mixed with Cole's mechanic friends, and her father ended up in a long conversation with one of Cole's Navy buddies about military history. Rachel gave a toast that was equal parts embarrassing and touching. Sadie demanded a dance with both of them and stepped on their feet repeatedly, but didn't care. Late in the evening, Vivian found herself alone with Cole, on the same porch where they'd sat so many times before. Snow was falling again, soft and quiet. "How are you doing?" Cole asked. "Good, really good. You?" "Same." He pulled her close. "We did it. We did. We're actually married." "Having second thoughts?" "Not even one." Cole kissed her temple. "Good, because you're stuck with me now. And Sadie. Speaking of, she wants to know when we're getting that dog." Vivian groaned. "I knew that was going to come back to haunt me." "We could get one? It might be nice." "Cole, we can barely handle our current chaos. So what's a little more?" Vivian looked up at him. At the man who'd waited for her in a snowstorm, who'd been patient when she ran, who'd loved her through every mistake and moment of panic. "You know what? Fine. Let's get a dog." "Really? Really? But you're in charge of training it." "Deal." They went back inside where Sadie was showing Vivian's father how to do some dance she'd learned at school. Rachel was arguing with one of the board members about something political. The caterers were packing up. The night was winding down. But Vivian didn't feel sad about it ending. She felt excited about what came next. A month later, they adopted a rescue dog, a mixed breed with floppy ears and too much energy that Sadie immediately named Nova, after a supernova. The dog destroyed 2 pairs of Vivian's expensive shoes in the first week, but Sadie loved her so much that Vivian couldn't be mad. Vivian slowly restructured her role at the company. She promoted her VP to CFO and built a stronger executive team she could actually trust to handle things when she wasn't there. She implemented a strict no emails after 8 rule and stuck to it more often than not. She missed Sadie's school play one more time because of an emergency, and she cried about it for an hour afterward. But she made the next one and the one after that, and Sadie forgave her because that's what families did. She and Cole fought about stupid things, dishes left in the sink whose turn it was to take Nova out, whether they really needed to attend another company function. But they also learned to fight better, to actually talk instead of shutting down, to forgive instead of keeping score. Sadie started calling her mom without hesitation. The first time she did it in front of other people at a parent-teacher conference, Vivian had to excuse herself to cry in the hallway. Cole found her there and held her while she sobbed, and the teacher pretended not to notice when they came back in with red eyes. Vivian's relationship with her father deepened. He visited monthly, staying in the guest room and helping Sadie with homework and listening to Vivian talk through work problems without judgment. He and Cole became friends, bonding over their shared love of terrible action movies and crossword puzzles. The company continued to grow, but Vivian stopped measuring her success by revenue numbers alone. She measured it by whether she made it home for dinner, by whether Sadie's science projects got done on time, by whether she and Cole still had time to sit on the porch and watch snow fall. 2 years after the wedding, Sadie's school had a Mother's Day event where kids were supposed to bring their moms. Sadie asked if Vivian could come, and Vivian cleared her entire calendar without hesitation. She sat in a tiny chair in a classroom decorated with hand-drawn cards and watched Sadie present a project about my mom. It included photos of them building snowmen, helping with homework, working on the solar system project that still hung in Sadie's room. At the bottom, in Sadie's careful handwriting, it said, "My mom used to be really busy, but now she makes time for me. She's not perfect, but she tries really hard. She taught me that family is the most important thing." "Thought," Vivian cried. Again. She was crying so much these days, and she didn't even care. After the event, she and Sadie got ice cream. Just the two of them, like they did sometimes when they needed to talk. "Did you like my project?" Sadie asked. "I loved it, although I'm not sure about the not perfect part." Sadie giggled. "You're not perfect. You burn grilled cheese." "Fair point. But that's okay. Dad says nobody's perfect, and that's what makes people interesting." "Ah shit, yes. Your dad's a smart man." "I know." Sadie swung her legs under the table. Can I tell you something? Always. I'm glad you married Dad, and I'm glad you're my mom, even if you're not perfect. Vivian reached across the table and squeezed Sadie's hand. I'm glad too. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. You and your dad both. Better than your company? Way better than my company. Sadie smiled, satisfied. Good. Because Emma's stepmom says that people are more important than jobs, and I think she's right. She is right. It just took me a long time to figure that out. That night, Vivian told Cole about the Mother's Day event while they got ready for bed. Nova was sprawled across the foot of the bed, snoring softly. Sadie was asleep down the hall, clutching the stuffed bear she'd had since she was a baby. She really loves you, Cole said. I love her too, so much it's terrifying. That's what love does. Yeah, I'm starting to realize that. Vivian climbed into bed next to him. You know what the crazy thing is? I spent 30 years building a company, chasing success, trying to prove I was untouchable, and none of it made me as happy as this, as us, as being here. You had to go through all that to get here, though. You wouldn't be the person you are without it. Maybe. I just wish I'd figured it out sooner. You figured it out when you were supposed to. Cole pulled her close. Besides, if you'd figured it out sooner, we might never have met, and that would have been tragic. Incredibly tragic. Like, they lay there in the dark, listening to Nova snore and the wind outside and the house settling around them. Vivian thought about the woman she'd been a few years ago, isolated, terrified of vulnerability, convinced that success meant being alone. That woman felt like a stranger now. She'd spent so long believing that letting people in would destroy her, that love was a weakness she couldn't afford, that the only way to be strong was to need nothing and no one. She'd been so spectacularly wrong. Real strength, she'd learned, wasn't about being untouchable. It was about being brave enough to be vulnerable, about admitting when you were wrong and asking for help and showing up even when you were terrified of failing. It was about choosing love over fear every single day, even when fear was screaming at you to run. It was about building a life that mattered more than quarterly earnings and board approvals and deals that would be forgotten in 5 years. It was about snow-covered mornings and terrible homemade snowmen and a little girl who called you mom and meant it with her whole heart. It was about a man who waited for you in a snowstorm and kept waiting through every moment you tried to push him away because he saw something in you worth fighting for. Vivian had spent her whole life trying to have it all: the company, the success, the power, the control. And she'd gotten it. She'd built an empire. But it had taken losing herself completely to realize that having it all didn't mean what she thought it meant. Having it all meant this. This messy, imperfect, beautiful life she'd almost walked away from because she was too scared to believe it could last. Having it all meant Sunday morning pancakes and science projects and arguments about who forgot to feed the dog. It meant missed deadlines sometimes and imperfect balancing acts and learning to forgive yourself when you couldn't be everywhere at once. It meant choosing to be present instead of perfect, choosing connection instead of control, choosing love instead of success that meant nothing when you went home alone. The billionaire CEO, who'd walked into that restaurant 3 years ago, wouldn't have understood any of that. She would have looked at Vivian now, splitting her time between boardrooms and school plays, saying no to opportunities that would have defined her career, measuring success by whether she made it home for dinner, and thought she'd given up, settled, failed. But Vivian knew better now. She hadn't given up anything. She'd gained everything that actually mattered. And if there was one thing she wanted people to understand, one lesson she'd learned the hard way, it was this: you don't have to choose between success and love, between ambition and connection, between building something that matters and having people who matter more. But you do have to stop being afraid of losing it all. You have to stop running from the very things that could make you whole. You have to stop treating love like a weakness and start treating it like the strength it actually is. Because at the end of your life, nobody's going to remember your quarterly earnings or your market share or how many deals you closed. They're going to remember whether you showed up, whether you loved hard and tried even when you failed and built something bigger than just your own success. They're going to remember if you were brave enough to let them in. Vivian had been terrified of that for 30 years. And then she'd met a mechanic who asked if she was okay instead of where she'd been. And everything changed. She still worked hard. She still ran a company. She still closed deals and fought with her board and made difficult decisions. But she also made it to soccer games. She also helped with homework. She also sat on a porch with her husband watching snowfall while their daughter slept safely inside and their ridiculous dog snored at their feet. She also chose love every single day, even when it was scary. Especially when it was scary, because that, Vivian had finally learned, was what having it all actually meant. Not perfection, not control, not an empire built so high that nobody could touch you, just love, and people who loved you back, and the courage to keep choosing them over and over, even when every instinct screamed at you to protect yourself by walking away. Cole's breathing had evened out. He was asleep, his arm heavy across her waist, anchoring her here in this moment. Vivian closed her eyes and let herself drift, thinking about the morning that would come too soon and the life that waited for her, messy and imperfect and more beautiful than anything she could have planned. And somewhere in the back of her mind, the woman she used to be finally stopped running, because she'd found something worth staying for. And that, after everything, was more than enough.